Berikut adalah naskah lengkap dalam bahasa Inggris USA yang telah digabungkan. Format ini dirancang khusus untuk TTS atau text to speech dengan tanda baca yang tetap terjaga dan pembagian paragraf yang jelas untuk intonasi dokumenter yang dramatis. The era of the inline-4 engine, once the soul of the Yamaha YZR M1, has reached its inevitable conclusion. As the paddock transitioned into the 2026 development cycle, the Iwata factory finally unveiled its most guarded secret, a 1000cc V4 powerhouse designed to reclaim the throne. However, the hardware was only half of the story. Standing in the Valencia pit box was Toprak Razgatlioglu, the World Superbike phenom who had spent years teasing a move to the premier class. This wasn't a mere PR stunt or a courtesy test for a loyal servant of the brand. It was a calculated disruption. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of high-octane fuel and the palpable tension of a manufacturer at a crossroads. Yamaha wasn't just testing a new engine configuration, they were testing the very limits of their philosophy. The Turkish rider's arrival signaled a departure from the smooth, high corner speed DNA that had defined the brand for decades, ushering in a brutal new era of performance. For years, Fabio Quartararo stood as the solitary wall defending Yamaha's reputation, a rider who extracted results from a machine that many believed was fundamentally flawed.
He was the gold standard, the metric by which every M1 rider was judged and ultimately found wanting. When Toprak suited up for the first official sessions, the comparison was immediate and unforgiving. The narrative in the media focused on whether a Superbike champion could survive the transition to carbon brakes and prototype tires. But the internal focus was far more clinical. Engineers scrutinized every data trace, comparing the Frenchman's surgical precision against Toprak's aggressive, late-braking geometry. Quartararo's dominance was built on a specific rhythm, a flow that had become the M1's identity. The question looming over the garage was no longer about the bike's top speed, but whether the El Diablo era was about to be challenged by a rider who refused to respect the established hierarchy of the MotoGP paddock. The physics of MotoGP are governed by the narrow operating window of the Michelin front tire, a component that has historically rejected the aggressive braking style used in production-based racing. In World Superbike, Toprak Razgatlioglu became a legend by standing the bike on its front wheel, a stoppie entry that defied logic. Upon his first laps on the M1, the technical friction was visible to the naked eye. Observers at Turn 1 noticed the rear of the Yamaha dancing under extreme load, a violent departure from the stable lines usually seen from the factory team.
Early reports suggested that Toprak was struggling to calibrate his sensory input to the stiffness of the prototype chassis. While Quartararo utilized a high apex speed approach to compensate for the engine's power delivery, Toprak attempted to V-shape the corners, forcing the machine to stop and rotate in a way the M1 was never designed to handle. This clash of styles created a technical stalemate during the morning sessions, leaving many to wonder if the experiment would fail. As the midday sun warmed the Valencia tarmac, the first signs of a breakthrough emerged. Reports from trackside analysts indicated that Toprak's third stint was no longer a struggle for survival, but a demonstration of raw adaptation. The sound of the V4 engine was different under his command, later on the downshifts, more aggressive on the initial throttle opening. Telemetry began to reveal a shocking reality. In the heavy braking zones of the opening sector, the Turkish rider was matching and in some instances exceeding the entry speeds recorded by the factory regulars. While he was still searching for the ultimate lap time, his ability to manipulate the front end of the machine was unprecedented for a MotoGP rookie. The garage monitors showed a rider who was rapidly shortening the braking zones, taking risks that the data suggested shouldn't be possible on a first outing.
It was the first crack in the narrative that MotoGP required years of specialized training to master, as the stop-and-go master began to find his rhythm. A critical distinction must be made between the official timing screens and the internal telemetry shared within the Yamaha engineering department. Publicly, the lap time showed Toprak Razgatlioglu trailing Quartararo by approximately 0.7 of a second, a respectable but expected margin for a transition day. However, the language fence around the paddock whispers a different story regarding sector-specific performance. Some believed that when the data was normalized for tire wear and fuel load, Toprak's theoretical ideal lap was significantly closer to the benchmark than the final sheet suggested. Speculation, fueled by paddock insiders, hinted that in the final sector, which demands extreme front-end feel and rapid direction changes, the Superbike star was consistently faster than the former world champion. These reports suggested that while Toprak locked the consistency over 20 laps, his peak potential over a single sector was a terrifying revelation for the competition. The data split created two different realities, one for the fans and one for the engineers. Inside the confines of the Yamaha hospitality, a subtle shift in gravity was occurring. A manufacturer typically builds its development path around its lead rider, and for years, that path was dictated by Fabio Quartararo's feedback.
However, the V4 project required a different kind of input, one that prioritized mechanical grip and late braking stability over traditional corner speed. As Toprak continued to post competitive sector times, a conflict of interest began to emerge. If the machine were to be developed to suit Toprak's point and squirt style, it would fundamentally compromise the high roll speed technique that Quartararo had perfected. Tensions were allegedly high as engineers debated whose feedback held more weight for the 2026 chassis design. The rumor mill suggested that Fabio was becoming increasingly vocal about the character of the bike, fearing that the pursuit of Toprak's unique strengths would leave the primary rider with a machine he no longer recognized. The garage was no longer a united front, but a laboratory of competing philosophies. The turning point of the test arrived during a private afternoon session, away from the prying eyes of the general media. Yamaha opted to conduct a simulated sprint run to evaluate the cooling efficiency of the new V4 engine under race conditions. It was during this window that the crisis of the established order took place. Unconfirmed reports indicated that Toprak Razgatlioglu, on a set of medium compounds, produced a sequence of 5 laps that were within 0.2 of Quartararo's best effort from the previous Grand Prix. For a rider with less than 100 laps on the machine to achieve such parity was a shock to the system.
The crisis wasn't just about speed, it was about the ease with which Toprak had bypassed the learning curve. If a newcomer could extract that much performance from a prototype in a single day, it raised uncomfortable questions about the ceiling of the current factory lineup. The data was no longer just a curiosity, it was a challenge to the status quo that sent ripples through the Iwata leadership. The most profound revelation of the Valencia test was not Toprak's speed, but why he was fast. The twist in the narrative emerged when analysts compared his telemetry with the long-standing design flaws of the M1. For years, Yamaha had suffered from an inability to stop the bike effectively in a straight line, forcing riders to rely on lean angle, a risky strategy in modern MotoGP. Toprak, however, brought a technique from the production world that utilized the rear brake and body positioning to stabilize the chassis under extreme deceleration. It was discovered that his outsider style unintentionally solved the very instability issues that had plagued the V4 prototype in its early simulations. He wasn't faster because he was a better rider than Quartararo in a traditional sense. He was faster because his specific habits aligned perfectly with the mechanical requirements of the new engine configuration. The very style that many predicted would fail in MotoGP became the missing piece of the puzzle for Yamaha's recovery, turning a skeptic's experiment into a technical breakthrough.
The aftermath of the test triggered a massive shift in the MotoGP transfer market and internal team dynamics. As news of Toprak's performance leaked to the wider paddock, the leverage held by Fabio Quartararo began to shift. The Frenchman, who had been the centerpiece of Yamaha's marketing and competitive strategy, now faced a reality where the factory had a viable and perhaps faster alternative. The fallout extended to the contract negotiations for the 2026 season, with rumors suggesting that Yamaha's budget was being reallocated to ensure Toprak's permanent transition to the premier class. Furthermore, the development direction of the M1 was reportedly pivoted to favor the braking-focused architecture requested by the Turkish camp. This move alienated certain members of the technical staff who had spent a decade refining the inline-4 philosophy. The test had successfully validated the V4 project, but it had also fractured the internal hierarchy, leaving the team to navigate a future where their star rider might no longer be the fastest man in the garage. As the crates were packed and the lights dimmed over the circuit Ricardo Tormo, the verdict was clear. The landscape of MotoGP had changed. The headline that Toprak Razgatlioglu was faster than Fabio Quartararo in his first real test was no longer dismissed as hyperbole or Turkish nationalistic pride. It was a grounded reality supported by sector times and mechanical synergy.
While official classifications may hide the nuances of fuel loads and tire aging, the engineers in Iwata now possess the truth.
They had found a rider who could tame the V4 and a machine that responded to aggression. The 2026 season now looms as a high-stakes gamble for Yamaha, a bet that an outsider's unorthodox brilliance can overcome the refined perfection of the established elite. Whether this speed translates into a world championship remains to be seen, but for one afternoon in Valencia, the rumor was silenced by the roar of a V4 engine and the sight of a Turkish flag flying at the top of the internal charts. The revolution has begun, and it is no longer a rumor.